What's up guys, Zunari here, and today I'm going to be showcasing you guys a premium Prism deck profile. So today is, well, at the time of recording, is July 8th, and this is when the ban list dropped for Cardfight Vanguard, and a V Premium we have gotten a Prism hit, so Rosa can no longer be played. But don't worry, Prism players, I have a list for you guys can try the premium format, so you can still play your Prism deck in premium. It probably won't be the strongest, but it is a very good and decent deck for you to try to take to your locals or just have fun with. So the deck is pretty cheap to upgrade. There are some important staples that you do need that could be a bit pricey where you are, but I still think the deck is pretty fun. So let's just get right into it. So we're gonna start with the Great Fours. So on my deck, I run 4 Legendary Prism Duo Nectaria. So Nectaria is a consistency piece in this deck. She essentially allows you to put any normal unit from your deck into your bind zone. So you can put any Prism unit into your bind zone, deck then, and if you call her to rearguard circle from Vert's effect, or just call her from hand once you're on stride. She's a 24k beater, which is pretty good, especially on the force marker. She's 34, and with other abilities, she can be really powerful as she's just a big beater and a good consistency piece. So that's why I run her as a 4 of. Next, for the only normal unit grade 3, we play 4 Prism Image Vert. So a very powerful deck. Well, once was a very powerful deck for about 2 years in the V Premium format. She is a pretty good grade 3 ride for the Premium format, as in she is able to get triple drive, and on your first grade 3 turn, you're able to get 4 attacks. Since you're running a lot more Prism cards, you can call anything for your bind zone that's a Prism in its card name, and she draws you a lot of cards. And she's not actually a bad turn if you don't have any cards to stride into. Since you're essentially a stride and a half with this card, you can just potentially just sit on Vert for a turn if you are waiting for a bigger play. So Vert is still pretty good in premium. She has the Prism name, and there's a couple other cards that synergize with Vert very well in this deck. So that's what we run her as a 4 of. Now on to the grade 2s. To the main card itself, the card that got hit in V Premium, we have 4 Prism Image Rosa. So Rosa in this deck is really insane. Since there are a lot more Prism units in Premium, you can potentially get any Prism that you add to your deck. So you almost always plus 1 or 2, plussing the other one to your bind zone. It is a counterblast, but we have a really good countercharge engine in this deck. It is very good. Rosa also, what she's called, she gives all of your Prism units 10k power if she's called for the bind zone, which is really good during your Heltrada turns or your Vert turns. So it just combos really well. This is essentially the main card you want to have in your hand or in your bind zone by the time you start striding or just in the early game. Next, we have 4 more other Prism units. So the next grade 2 we're playing is 4 Prism Romance Lumiere. So Lumiere is a very old card from older Prisms during the time where Labrador and the original Vert came out. So she's essentially a 12k attacker. The reason why I play her is that she does make some numbers, even though she doesn't hit as high as like Clear or Rosa when she's called for bind zone. However, she could still hit Excel by herself. Is sometimes you don't really need you need to save cards in hands for Heltrata or any other cards for any other plays. So she's an okay card, as well as if you ride her in some situations against like an Excel deck that's trying to damage deny you, you can ride her instead, and you can still use the Rosa on your rearguard circle instead of riding Rosa and potentially get damage denied out of your turn 3 with Vert and stuff. As well as she could still make decent numbers if you combo her with certain Prism cards from the old expansions and so on and so forth. So she's still a pretty good card to have in your deck. Next, a one-up tech, we have Orient Prism Ahri. So Ahri in this deck is more so of a tech where you call her from Vert, as in we play a grade 1 PG that is able to bind itself. So she's also a way that you can potentially get that PG back from Vert. It is a 3 to 2 CB play, but depending if you manage your resources right, you get your PG that you bind it back, or any cards from your bind zone that you call it from. Since only players are one of, you can very easily search her with Nectaria, or search her from any other of the Prism searchers from V. So it's a really good card to have in case you need more defensive power, or you just want to balance more cards for power. So she is a GB lock card in a 9K, but I think it's justified in this case for more power and to be able to return stuff to your hand from calling them from Vert or Heltrada. Lastly, for the grade 2s, this is not a Prism unit, but I think this is a good card to have in your deck. We have Courteous Beauty Syria. So Syria in this deck is meant to add more consistency in finding your Prism units or adding cards that you want to your hand. Since discarding isn't really a big cost in this deck, since you can get back your Prisms from Vert or Clear, Syria is also a 20k beater by herself once you start striding or on your grade 3 turn. So she can hit pretty sizable numbers. So she starts compressing the deck a little bit harder, and she is a 10k. So if you do end up riding her, it's not the end of the world, and she has a free effect. So even if you have no damage in your damage zone, you don't get outplayed while having any damage. So that's why we run 3 of Syria in the deck. Now on to the grade 1s. We have the main play you want to ride turn 1 is Image Clear. So Clear is a very important card to be able to start your engine going. You can search all of your other Prism card names that is not grade 1 or lower. So you could get Rosa, you get Vert, you get Nectaria, start getting your plays in deck thinning earlier. And her being called from Vert or Heltrada skill or any other cards that cause her from the bind zone, she's able to draw, so she essentially pluses you another card, and she gets 10,000 power. So she's an 18k attacker or beater. So it's really, really good if you combo it with Rosa, of course, because she's 38k on a force marker, but 28k solo if you use her ability. And she is very important in this deck to be able to start getting your engine rolling. Now on to the perfect guards. So we're not running any of the draw perfect guards, but we're going to be playing one of brand new Prism Flash Sapphire. So Flash Sapphire, I run her as a 1 because we do play Garnet in his deck, and Garnet needs limit break 5. So if you have her in a drop zone, which is very easy to get her in a drop zone since we have Rosa, Clear, Vert to be able to essentially just dig through our deck to find her. Or you could just have Nectaria call her into PG with her later. You can make Garnet's limit break 5 into limit break 4, so you don't heal out of it on 5, or so on and so forth. Only players one of, because your Vanguard needs to be Prism in the early game. It is possible for you to ride Syria or to be on a non-Prism Vanguard, and if your opponent rushes you, you can't use this. So that's why I only run her as a 1. You can run her as a 4 of if you're running a pure Prism build, or you could just run this as a 1 of like I am in this deck. So the next perfect guard, if you've seen any of my tweets, I was hinting at this card. We're playing Prism Duo Arya. So Arya in this deck she's a searchable PG, and she does not need your Vanguard to be only Prism. That is the only reason why I'm running this card. Instead of running draw perfect guards, this deck draws enough, and you can end up decking yourself out if you draw too many cards or using too many skills as Soul Charge. and you compress really fast. So just having Arya in the deck to be able to search it out from Rosa or any other cards, or you can even deck in it with Nectaria if you wanted to. It just helps the deck survive a bit more and to not like deck yourself out by you using a lot of skills. Also, since it's a grade 1, there are a lot of cards like Ichikashima or Talented Rhino that can stop you from using grade 0s. So Arya is a grade 1 and you can just perfect guard with it. So that saves your life a lot. If you want, you could have a split between 2-2 with Arya and Sapphire. But I'm going with 3 with this one because it just allows me to have a bit more flexibility against certain techs I might want to try in the future, like different grade 3s or different grade 2s into the deck to improve. Next, we're on Prism Promise Princess Lady. So Lady is another important card. I know she is very expensive right now. She's about maybe 10 on TCG Player for where I'm at. But she is very essential. Essentially, if you bounce her or return her to your hand for Rigor Circle, if you have a Prism Vanguard, you can counter charge 1 to soul charge 1 and choose one of your units to give it 4k to the end of turn. So once you do that, you can only call her by card effects, which guess what? Heltrada and Vert can easily call them back. If you have a lady in a bind zone, you can call her back. If you bounced her from Vert's skill, Heltrada can just call back the same lady. You have to choose another unit, so you cannot choose herself to get the 4k to hit 11. But she manages the soul and counterblast issue really well, that you don't really need any other counterblast. Plus she's a prism, so you can search for her with Rosa and just have a nice, consistent counter charge or soul charge engine. Even though she is a 5k shield and 7k base, she provides a lot of power and a lot of resources for the deck, and that's why you have to run her as a 4 of. Lastly, for the grade 1s, as I said, my other deck profiles, we are running 3 Light Elemental Hanali. So Hanali is there because of the meta. Is getting a lot more faster with a lot of multi-attacks, and you need to be able to survive. Even though Prisms can build a pretty big hand, you do have some cheeky defensive plays. It won't be enough against all the decks, especially since in premium format right now, Nightmare Dolls have gotten a light hit, and Order Colony is most likely gone. However, they still have their Gridora Stride and many other cards that they can use for the format. So Hanali is going to be a very important and key part in surviving a lot of these new strides with multi-attacks. So that's why you play Hanali as a 3 of. Now on to the triggers. First up, we have to talk about the Heal Guardian in this deck. We play this as a 4 of. You could play other cards like Spiana to return the hand and counter charge, but you already have the full counter charge engine. And this card is just very important to be able to survive the early game against some heavy rush decks or decks that try to crit you out early. Yeah, and she's really good because she's also a cost for a Heal Guardian, of course. This will be reprinted in the next clan collection of 5 and 6, so she'll be a lot cheaper than she is now. So definitely you want to run 4 of the Heal Guardians. Now you can opt to run like at least 1 Prism Heal, since you can search it out with Rosa and be able to have an early G Guardian, but I'd rather just run the 4 Heal Guardians over that. Next we have 4 of Wrapping Chorus Trudy. So Trudy, I play her as a 4 of because you do not want to be discarding Verts to Stride. You want to be rewriting Verts to get more force markers. That can also be solved by you just playing more grade 3s that have force marker gaining abilities like Anj or Lupina, but I think it's just better just to sit on Vert since most of your deck revolves around you being on a Prism Vanguard. So Trudy just allows you to just save cards in hand, and you draw a lot and compress, so you're able to just have her in your hand. if you have to discard like 1 or 2 cards, I think it's still fine to be able to stride, or sometimes you can just sit on Vert if you don't want to stride. So we're playing 4 of the discarding grade 3 strikers. Next, a very spicy tech I've been trying out. It's been really good so far. I've been playing 4 of Snowskip Pavi. This is a D series card, and this is the 20k front. So in this deck, Heltrada can bounce back the front row. It called new cards to the front row, and essentially you have 2 standing rear guards, and getting a crit is helpful sometimes, but we also play Garnet in this deck, so your front row could get a potentially a crit trigger if you check one. Also, this just increases your defensive capabilities of having 20k shields in your deck. However, I do understand if you do not want to run this trigger, you could run the crit that goes to the soul to give 10k power and you draw a card. But I've really been enjoying this card in the deck to be able to essentially pressure my opponent whenever I start striding, since I can press a lot of cards. It just creates really nice pressure, and my rear guards are a lot more beefier when you do the 8 attack Heltrata combo, or 5 attacks with 2 crits with Garnet. So that's why I run 4 of the 20k front triggers. Next, we run 2 of Prism Image Sunshine Clear. So Clear is a very good card to be able to search out your key pieces, or you can do cheeky plays like Superior calling a Rosa, a Vert, or a Clear on your stride turns. I only play as a 2 of because there's not many opportunities for me to actually use this card, as well as it uses a lot of CB. If you don't have late, then you can ruin your whole entire Heltrata turn. But if not, you can always just have a cheeky early game play with like Rosa, no, not Rosa, Vert, to be able to bounce it back to hand. You can Superior call like a Rosa from your deck, and if you have more counter blast, you can use that Rosa skill to essentially plus even more, and she goes back to deck, which is pretty good. Again, I only play with the 2 of because she is also a 5k trigger, and that doesn't really do a lot of pressure, but she's also there just for consistency. Consistency is the name of this deck. You just want to have your pieces to be able to go towards your main wood cons of the deck. So that's why I'm only playing 2 of her. Next, we are playing 1 Dreamer Crook. Dreamer Crook extends your multi-attacking plays in this deck, especially if you have Nectaria on the board and you have her ability active. She swings 24 to 34 twice, which is really good. She can extend your Garnet plays, and she's just a really good card to have in your deck. Although having a stand trigger checked during like your Garnet or Heltrata turns aren't as impactful since they are standing in the front row, it is still a good extender in the deck. And this card is at 1 of because it is at 1 of for the Bushiroad restriction list, so use it wisely. Lastly, we have one of the Overtrigger. Again, buffet card. If you check it, especially in this deck, essentially all of your rear guards are getting 10k power, especially if you stride to Garnet. That's a lot of pressure your opponent has to deal with. Is this a good card in general? It's really cheap, especially since there's 4 other different types, 5th including this one. So that's why you run this Overtrigger over something like the Cray Elemental Overtrigger. Last for the starter, it's pretty obvious. We're just running the V Series starter. Pretty good card, gets you a quick shield and you draw a card. You get the quick shield if your opponents are grade 1 or greater. And yeah, I haven't tried any of the other Prism cards because I don't think they really work well, and there's nothing to really like get massive value other than just having this as your starting Vanguard. So yeah, that is all for the main deck. Now to talk about which marker to use for your deck. So there are actually 2 options, and they're both very important. So you have Force 1, which is for your big multi-attack plays. You swing higher numbers, of course, but you don't really pressure a lot with the crits in that aspect. You need a lot more critical triggers or a lot more trigger luck to be able to close out your opponent. Now, Force 2 is also an option because with your strides or with Rosa and Nectaria, you're able to at least pressure for at least 20 to 24k, and if you have decent boosters or cars that you want in your front row, or you're playing more of a front heavy build like me, you can play the Force 2 marker and essentially try to choke your opponent out from 3 to 4. Since a lot of this, since Garnet is a stride that can give them 2 crit, if you have a stride, sorry, if you're playing Force 2, you could essentially choke your opponent out at 3 damage, which can help in a lot of matchups if you don't want to give them a lot of damage, like Neanderthals, because every CB converts it to like 2 attacks, or some decks that do scale well with counterblast they get. And this is also a deck that doesn't really scale as much with counterblast. It's kind of like 2 to 1 counterblast a turn, but it's mostly 2 with Heltrada and Garnet. So in some matchups you want to go Force 1 just for, since you have a better early game than most decks. You're able to just rush them down and essentially pressure them out with Force 1. Or some decks you don't want to rush them and get them a lot of CB, use Force 2 to try to cap them with how much damage that they take. You could be a little bit more defensive in your gameplay, in your routes with this deck. With that being said, on to the strides. First off, I've been talking about this card for most of the video. We were playing 4 brand new Prism Shining Garnet. So Garnet is kind of like the first Crystal Luster or Chain Ranker card. However, she chooses a card with Prism as your heart, and you only can choose 1 ability. So, and the reason why I play 4 is because there are sometimes you want to stride, but you don't have anything set up with Vert. So sometimes you can stride to Garnet, use her first ability, which is a Persona Flip, and you can copy her first ability to try to draw some cards that have 4 drives instead of just 3. And mostly she is a win con card, as in if you hit the limit break 5, all of your Prism units in their name get a crit. So that means your from our Prisms like Lumiere, she's 12k in a crit. If you're a Force 1 marker, she's 22k in a crit. Your Nectarias are 24k and above with a crit. Your Roses are 20k in a crit. Clear, it like all of your Prisms now have a crit, as well as your Vanguard has a crit. So if you copy Vert's second ability to bounce 2 back and call 2, now that's 5 attacks with 2 crits. Now I think a lot of cards from Premium Collection are able to like defend this. However, depending on when you use this card, it can be devastating for your opponent because they'll have to guard every single attack at 4 damage or 5, or else they'll lose. Unless they have a heal trigger. But since you're Alter Break, they'll have to hope for a 6 damage heal or an Overtrigger. So that's why Runner has 4, because you're able to essentially set up for a turn where you don't want to just sit on Vert, but you like your GB count for other plays such as like Tira or something. And Garnet is just a very nice card to stride into when you want to close out the game. 5 attacks with 2 crits is very powerful for this deck. Next, another one combo deck. We have 2 Ready Ocean Heltrada or Heltrada. So you could play more copies of this if you don't want to play Garnet. You could play her as a 3 of. Essentially, this card is 8 attacks for essentially 2 CB and a Soul Blast 1, since you're able to at least get back some of the cards you discard. And for Prisms in this deck, it is not very hard to gain hand. It is not very hard, so you can pay for the cost fairly easily compared to most decks. And the 8 attacks is very efficient if they don't have a Hanali or able to call a Hanali. And it's very powerful. Since Heltrada can provide 4 attacks, Vert provides a 2 extra attacks, which is 6 for the rear guard circle. You're attacking with Vert and the Vanguard twice, so that's 8 attacks. that can end a lot of decks that just don't build a lot of hand size, but also is just a very good stride to go into if you feel like you can throw a lot of cards out of your hand and they don't have any like denial griffin plays or interaction to disrupt your turn very well. Even so, like I said, we play fronted deck, so you have more chances to check a front and have their power increase even more. And this is really well with Force 2 as well, because you essentially get 2 circles, or at least 1 circle, that can attack 2 times with 2 crits. So that could be very pressuring to your opponent as well. So that's what we run her as a 2 of. Now on to the 1 of cards that we play as a tech. We play 1 Shushu popular favorite Tira. So you can deck out in this deck. Hand testing and playing this deck a bit, you can deck out pretty fast if you do not manage late well, because late is a very good card, but you should not always spam the card, because if you do, you run out of deck. And this deck can deck out like near second stride. If the game goes on too long, you will deck out. So Tira is just another way to refill your deck, as well as if you go Force 2, you can just put a Force 2 marker under her and she'll swing big twice for 2 crit. And yeah, it's just another option if you feel like Heltrada or Garnet won't be able to finish the game. Maybe you can pressure with Tira first to soften up their hand, and then go to either or of your 1 con. So that's why we play 1 of her. Next, we play 1 of Perfect Performance Ange. So this is, again, just another card for Late Joker. You can essentially call it 2 down 2 ladies for this card, and essentially make her free to get a bunch of resources or to clear off your opponent's board for some reason. But she's still a pretty good card to have in your deck just for those Link Joker matchups. Her and Tira has been reprinted, so they're very easy to get. And yeah, there's not much to say about this card, since you're better, you gain a lot more advantage just by playing the Prism deck normally, or even Vert, just to be able to build up a hand size. So this is probably like a super rare just in case button if you need to use it. So that's the only player as 1 of. Lastly, the last 2 cards we have Progenitor of Deep Sea Ballerina. So banana boat, whale, whatever you like to call it, it's good against, well, I would say Order Colony, but sometimes you can still fight a Gridora player. It's a good free stride. Sometimes you can kill early with Force 2 if you have the right opportunity to. It's actually a bit easier to get this in other decks, since you're able to consistently go through your deck and search for prisms and add Vert to hand. It's also a case like your opponent, again, only has like 1 perfect guard, and you feel like they can still guard your attacks with the last heals they have in your hand. Prisms gain a lot of hand cards in hand, so you're able to just discard your triggers and your great ones to essentially try to force out the G Guardians and to kill them. So it's still a pretty good option in this deck. Lastly, we have the Xerath Dragon of Distant Sea Megiddo. So Megiddo in his deck, if you have like a Nectarian drop somehow, if you have a Nectarian bind, you can call them out. Again, I will always keep playing this as like a 1 of, in case I need to stride into this card or I have no other options left. As well as, even if I don't win with Megiddo, I can still play V Prisms that are untouched in premium. So it's not as strong as like the stride decks, obviously, but it's still a pretty good heart to sit on, since you can still do your premium plays. You just lose out to G Guardians, so just be careful of that. But Megiddo is still a pretty good card to have in your deck, and just to be able to sometimes get those random, funny, cheeky wins. Next, on to the G Guardians. We are playing 2 of Highest Society Citron. So Citron allows you to call essentially a grade 1 or greater from your hand, and you call your Hanalies to be able to disrupt opponents' aggressive plays, and able to get that 25k shield for them. You can also call Rosa to be able to plus during your opponent's turn in the deck thing a bit. You're able to call Syria to dig, and she could be 20k. I'm at 20k rear guard on your opponent's turn as well. If you need to essentially like do a mini Rackham with better power, since you have Syria, you could dig. You can also call Nectaria for some reason if you just don't want a grade 4 in your hand to guard with. There's a lot of plays you can do with Citron in this deck to be able to defend against your opponent's attacks. So that's what we play her as a 2 of. Next, we play 1 hand-in-hand Leona. So this would go with LaRousse, since she's able to bounce any unit on your rigor circle, so she can bounce back triggers. However, you have to call a card if you bounce the card from the rigor circle. With Lady, she works also during your opponent's turn, so you can essentially get a free counter charge, and your Vert will be 17k. Now, if you ride Nectaria, she become 18k, which I'm not sure why would you ride Nectaria in some cases. I haven't really rode Nectaria in any case or tested in any situation, but Leona is able to essentially just buy something for free while any cost, and then she can give that unit 5k shield, so she can be a 30k shield at max. I'm at max with a grade 1 like clear, or you know, just get some rear guards that you want for your rear guard circle out of the rear guard circle. So she's good as a 1 of. Butchero, please reprint this card. This card is very expensive, and we need another revival selection set. So yes, I would love Leon to be reprinted. Next, we run 1 of Blessed Sparkle Sandy. This can honestly be a 2 if you want to. Sandy is very powerful, as in she counts how many cards you have in your hand. She gets 5k for every 2 cards you have in your hand, and you count boss 1 and she gets 5,000 shield. So Prisms gain allowing like 11 card hands, so she gets a lot of shield. This is also pretty good in Highlander as well, because they get a lot of cards, but Prism does it just for doing Prism things from V. So she's really big. So if you want big Guardians, you could also play just Sandy for that reason. Very good card in this deck. I don't really have much more to say other than just be worried that she does have to flip G Guardian for the cost. You have to be GB1 for to activate this ability. Lastly, we have 2 Diva Salvation LaRousse. So LaRousse in this deck, I feel like since you have Lady, you could get even a higher shield. So if you have Lady on your Rigor circle and you just use her skill to bounce her back, you essentially can use her skill for free, get 50k shield, and then give your Vanguard an extra 4k power. Now, the 4k might not matter in every case, but essentially you're just able to use LaRousse for free in this deck. So that's why I kind of value that over using Sandy, since Sandy uses 2 cards in your G zone, or 2 G Guardians essentially. She only uses herself, and Lady basically refunds her cost. It gives you extra defensive power for the turn. You also bounce back a grade 3, but you rarely call grade 3 plus other than Nectaria. Bounce back Nectaria isn't bad, but you can just leave her on Rigor circle. Unless your opponent decides to retire or lock it or something. But LaRousse is a very good card, especially in Prisms, since you have Lady, you have other cards you want back your hand, like maybe Clear or Rosa, or a PG that you called for some reason. So LaRousse is a very good G Guardian, and that's why we play her as a 2 of. Now you can also replace her a 1 copy for a Sandy if you want. So that's just a choice you have in the deck. And that is all for the premium Prism deck profile. So I know Commander Jaime has made a couple videos with premium Prisms, so I wanted to do my own spin on things with this deck. I really enjoy this deck. I always loved Prisms and premium. It was a very aggro version of Bermuda that I liked. And I just think that now, since a lot more people are having Prism decks, they can try to play in premium, and that they can have a little bit more fun with their premium Prism deck. Since Rosa and Clear and Vert, they're such a really strong engine. There's a lot of Prism cards that they released over the years. You can try your own fun combos and techs and just have fun with the deck. I really love Prisms in premium. So with that being said, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit a like, a subscribe, a comment, and also hit the notification bell if you want to see more of my premium deck profiles. And if you're interested in like a combo video or more text that you want to add to your premium Prism list, just let me know in the comments section down below. So with that being said, I'm Zenarion, and I'm signing off.